You talk there about being a career woman, and I'd be mad to not ask you a question about Love Island.
It's catch-22. There always is. I think a lot of people didn't like how I came across or didn't like how I handled certain situations, and that's perfectly okay, like, to have their opinion. I rarely see people like me on TV, in social media, anything like that. How many other women are there like me that don't see themselves at all represented? So that was a massive part for me.
Do you find yourself winging your way through life, hoping you'll figure it all out on the way? Hello, it's me, Gabby Mendez, your 20s wing woman, and you're listening to the Talk Twenties podcast. Here you'll find me chatting to influential 20-somethings on different topics that matter to you in your 20s and all the things we never got taught in school. This is your ultimate guide to adult life. So if you're ready, let's go. So before we get started with today's episode, we're going to say a huge, big thank you to our sponsors of this episode, Femmes. They are a brand new fashion brand, and for me, they're changing the game, to be honest. I'm currently wearing Femmes. I've got a little blazer on and a little nice top. I absolutely love it. I was a customer before they sponsored this podcast, so I absolutely believe in this brand. They're all about empowering women, and their kind of whole ethos is multifaceted clothes for multifaceted women. So you might go from a meeting at work to the gym to out with friends in the evening, and you can wear one outfit and just put a blazer on, put some heels on, and still look the part. So Sharon, you've got some bits here that you've just taken a look at. What do you think of Femmes?
Do you know what? I'm a massive fan of staple items. I think everyone's trying to be more conscious about where they spend their money and the clothes they buy and where they buy them from. So for me, like, having staples just means I can transform my wardrobe, have amazing outfits all of the time, but without spending as much money and, like, checking my footprint, basically. So massive fan of Femmes. I think the quality of the product's really good as well. And that's something that I think fast fashion really misses out on.
Yeah, I mean, when you get some items, you kind of get them and you can wear them once or twice, or they're pieces that don't really go with a lot of other things. So I might wear them once, but they don't go with the rest of my wardrobe. So I only really end up wearing them a handful of times before they're given to a charity shop or sold on eBay, etc., etc. And I think what I really want to add to my wardrobe, just like you, is kind of staple pieces that really are going to last the test of time. So yeah, Femmes don't often offer a discount code, guys. So if you want to go and get yourself some Femmes, they have done us a very, very special one, which is 10% off. If you just use Talk 20s in checkout, then you can grab yourself some Femmes. Hello and welcome to a brand new episode of the Talk 20s podcast. If you're not already subscribed or following, make sure you click that button right now so you never miss an episode of us in the studio. This week, I'm joined by the one, the only Sharon Gaffka, who you may recognise from this year's Love Island. We're not just going to be talking about Love Island gossip, though. We've got some really important issues that we're going to be discussing today, and I'm really, really excited to have her in the studio. So hi, Sharon. Thank you so much for coming in. I'm excited to chat to you today.
Thank you so much for having me.
You've got so much kind of going on at the moment. You know, you've got really exciting projects and really important campaigns that you're working on at the moment, aren't you? Tell us a little bit more, though, about where this kind of stems from, because it kind of all links back to your life before the villa, before you stepped into Love Island. Tell us a little bit more about Sharon pre-Love Island.
Yeah, I mean, Sharon I feel like she sounds really boring, but actually, like, when I think back to it, she's probably not as boring as she sounds.
Definitely not.
I think when I was growing up, like, you know, I think people that know me really well know that I have immigrant parents, European and Asian. So for me, like, it was always that ethic that you have to work hard because my family didn't give up their old life for nothing. And like seeing kind of political injustices from where they grew up made me really want to do something that was bigger than myself. I remember at 14 turning around to my teacher and said, I'm going to be an MEP one day. Thanks to Brexit, that's never going to happen. But like, I remember saying that I wanted to do something that was going to change other people's lives and that was going to make other people just have an easier life, like not have the life that my mum necessarily had growing up. And that's where things like me getting involved in period poverty came from. You know, my mum was very candid with me, telling me that when she was growing up, she didn't have access to sanitary items and like things that she had to do to get by, therefore missing out on her education and things like that. So I've learned not to take things for granted just based off their experiences. And I always wanted to be a civil servant, but I kind of fell into it the way I did. I didn't go to uni, didn't do the traditional route. My dad was very anti-university because none of my family ever went, so I was the first one. But it was once I was there, and like, you know, there was a bit of a weird moment. I think the first 2 years I was like, this isn't what I thought it was going to be. Like, I'm not going to have any direct impacts on anything. But as further along my career went, I was just like, yeah, this is what I want to do. And like, I don't think it will ever change. Like, I'll always want to do something like this. So I guess that's like, you know, I think people would be lying if they didn't go into the villa for experiences, for exposure, for opportunities. But I just wanted a different type of opportunity. And I'm using it and I'm getting that now. Like, I want to be able to speak about something, and spiking's always something that I've always felt ashamed of. Like, I've been spiked probably a handful of times, if not more, in my adult life, and I've always been ashamed of it. I've always blamed myself, and now I'm hearing other women talk about it, and the more I talk about it, the more other people coming out. So for me, like, yeah, it's that's like 2022 biggest goal, really, to be able to do something massive with that.
So going back to your spiking experience, one of the biggest experiences that you have that you talk about quite openly was actually pre-Love Island. It was in July 2020 when things had just opened up from, you know, our very first lockdown that we had in the UK. Tell us your experience of that night, because it was quite a brutal story, and it's kind of what has kind of stemmed all of this work that you're now doing for all the spiking campaigns.
Yeah, definitely. I think it was definitely the most traumatic experience. This time it was somebody who was definitely looking to hurt me. It goes through your head sometimes when you're like, is this person looking to hurt me sexually or just physically? And it was the mistrust I think I got from public services, or the fact that because I was a young woman, I'm irresponsible and I'm the reason to blame. And, you know, it wasn't just public services that had that. I think, you know, my family at the time were like, well, why didn't you do this? Why didn't you do that? Or like my partner at the time was like, why didn't you like made it more about him than it was about me. And it just felt like I was alone, and it felt like it was a very single experience. And it just, when, you know, it was the first time we'd been out for ages. It was the first time I'd seen my friends in 6 months. A lot of us are frontline workers. So, you know, we'd had a really tough time, and it was my friend's birthday, and it just went downhill because people thought I couldn't handle my alcohol. So for me, it was like, you know, it was the only time I've ever really been to hospital, and I've woken up and I don't know where I am. I don't have any of my belongings. I don't know how I got there, and I still don't know. And it's really horrible to hear that that's a common story and it's not just a one-off.
Were you tested for drugs in your system at that point when you were in the hospital?
So I wasn't directly tested for drugs. They said they found something in my bloodstream that turned out to be linked to a date rape drug. But only my friend knew that because of the industry she worked in, that allowed her to know what that was. I'd phoned the hospital a couple of days later to get reports on what had happened to me. I was told by a senior member of staff, like a senior clinician, that they don't test for drugs because they don't choose to spend their funding there. And if I wanted to be tested for drugs, or I believe that I'd been spiked, I should have gone to a police station. But if I can't remember my own name, then how am I supposed to know that? And like, does anybody know that? So for me, like the first point of contact is education. Like not just educating victims of spiking and what they can do, but also educating people on why spiking's wrong. Since I started speaking out on TikTok, it's been immature young boys coming back with ridiculous comments like not all men, not just women, not like, and it's like, wow, we really need to understand, first of all, what consent is, and be really educated on why doing something like that is wrong, which is weird because to me it's common sense. But apparently it's not to a lot of people.
Why do you think also that the establishments aren't checking or taking it as seriously as previous? Because obviously we had the big girls' night in that happened. It was back in October time, wasn't it? And that was basically a boycott. So, you know, girls staying there, they're not going out. Do you think that obviously it was a positive thing that happened, but do you think that that's the answer by basically just boycotting and saying you're not going out? Or do you kind of feel like that's putting the onus on women to say that they can't actually live the lives that they want to live because of what other people's actions might do?
Yeah, I think I think for the initial boycott, it was positive to show establishments that this is the impact it's going to have on your business if we don't feel safe when we're going out. Otherwise, I think boycotting and not going out is just another thing that we're taking away from ourselves. You know, it was like things with like Sarah Everard where women were advised not to go out. Yeah. And it's like, well, why are our rights being infringed when we've done nothing wrong? But I do think that with establishments, it's hard. Like there's things like costs and stuff like that. Like I hear a lot about establishments talking about cost of checking, cost of this, cost of that. But it's like you can put very simple things in place that cost you nothing. that I think that would be beneficial to anyone. And it's like, I just remember being 18 and being stopped at my local nightclub for having chewing gum in my bag. So if you could be so strict on chewing gum, why are people passing with drugs? It's not even just drugs anymore, it's needles. Like, how are you concealing needles into a nightclub? I just don't understand.
Yeah. No, it is crazy. There's also this element, and I think you said you kind of experienced it with like victim stigma. So it's kind of put, if it is a young, vulnerable girl, it's the assumption that she's just drank too much and she's drank beyond her limits, and she shouldn't be doing that, essentially. What's your view on that? Because, I think it's just, it's another way that we're kind of being punished, essentially, for going out and having a good time, and it's not your fault if you get spiked.
It's ridiculous. Like, for me, it's the same as, when a woman gets sexually assaulted and they're like, well, what did you wear? Were you drunk? It's the same kind of, like, tarnishing people with the same brush. And for me, like, I'd be lying if I said I hadn't got to one point in my life where I drank so much that it was my own fault.
But that wasn't one of them.
No, that wasn't. And, as I've got older, I've learned, like, that was 18-year-old Sharon. I'm 26 now. So, and I was 24 at the time, and I understand my limits. Like, I was a working professional. I knew how to carry myself. I knew, like, I'm very responsible. I turn around to my friends all the time. When I'm ready to go home and I've had enough, I've had enough. And I've never disappeared on a night out. So that's when my friends knew something was wrong, because I was just nowhere to be found. And I was so unresponsive. Like, my breath was getting low. My eyes were rolling to the back of my head. And that's not like, that's not lunchtime, like going out for a glass of wine with my salad. It's like, that's something quite severe. And I think, again, victim shaming only comes with lack of education, because you don't understand, like, why is it on to the victim, but why are we not educating people on why spiking is wrong? It's like the same notion that boys will be boys, or not all men. It's the same thing, like, why are people finding it okay to say that?
Absolutely. So you're currently trying to lobby government and have important conversations. You've got a meeting coming up, haven't you? Hopefully.
Yes,
next week. What are the kind of things that you're going to be outlining in that meeting, and what are the changes that you want to see taking place in order to make this situation in the UK in particular change? What change do you want to see?
I think for me, the initial meeting is I want to get, this person on side. It's my local MPs. I want to get them on side. I want to be able to get their support to write a letter to the Home Office, to be able to, and to the Department of Education, to be able to get them on side as well. For the Home Office, for example, like, just to be able to talk about changes in legislation when it comes to spiking is very much outdated. And I kind of took that inspiration from women like Gina Martin, who'd had the upskirting bill pushed through Parliament, just because I find that legislation in this country is more reactive rather than proactive, and that needs to change. And then for me, in terms of Department of Education, to put something in place to talk about consent, drug, like, when you have drug education in school, no one was talking to you about spiking.
No.
It was always about class A's, why you shouldn't do them, why they're dangerous, but no one talks to you about spiking, what to do. And for me, I also want blanket advice for victims of spiking, like what you can do. From my experience, like, I went onto websites like Talk to Frank, NHS England, all of that stuff, and there was just no blanket advice. Everything was different. Like, oh, you could cover your drink, or don't leave your drink unattended. That's not advice. Where can I go to? Who can I speak to? And
that's more preventative as well, isn't it? That's kind of stopping it from happening. But when it does happen, like, what are the steps you should be taking? And I think that's I don't know that information myself. I'm 26. I should probably know that. Kids should know that. It should be taught in schools, and we're not getting taught it, which is one of the biggest things that we talk about on the podcast. Is kind of, is our education system outdated in areas? And this is definitely one of the places where change needs to happen. And I think it's brilliant that you are using your platform that you have now to change such an important part of society as well. So, I mean, I think you're doing a fabulous job with that as well. But it's not your only kind of mission, as, we talked about, being a multifaceted woman and having lots of different identities and lots of projects that you have going on. You are a Women's Trust ambassador as well. Tell us a little bit more about your role with the Women's Trust.
Yeah, so I actually became a Young Women's Trust ambassador in 2018. I'd just come back from a 5-week trip in Japan. While I was in Japan, I became an ambassador for stopping violence against women in Japan. I actually used to donate to the charity. I used to be just one of their like sponsors and things. And I think their social media team went through their sponsors because they were looking for brand ambassadors, and they just came across my social media. I wouldn't call myself a micro influencer, but I had like 15,000 followers. Obviously they'd looked at my LinkedIn and I'd seen that I'd been working working in government. And I was talking about equal pay for women a lot on social media and things like that. So for me, it was just another way to get involved with a smaller organisation, because I feel like with smaller organisations, they have more impact. For me, like obviously pre-COVID, I was being able to go to events with them, events they were running, talk about their CV workshops they do. So they have a work it out program where women that want to get back into work can send them their CVs, and they've got really good relationships with recruiters, agencies and things like that to get proper professional advice on your CV and how to get back into work. And, you know, for me, being a career woman, like that is something no one will ever be able to take away from me. And I think that's just the stability that a lot of women don't have. And that's like one thing that I really wanted to work with them on, to be able to give women, especially women like me coming from like that ethnic minority background, to have the same access to the same opportunities to jobs that their male counterparts have.
Absolutely. We also, when we were chatting about this episode as well, we talked about how the pandemic has had a huge impact on women in particular. You know, the gender pay gap has not got better. In fact, it has worsened in this time. What would be the changes that kind of you would like to see? I mean, it's hard to kind of pinpoint a few different things, but like, what do you think that, you know, we can do as a society to kind of educate ourselves on this a little bit more?
Yeah, I think actually there's that old-fashioned kind of belief that you shouldn't talk about your salary because it's rude. It's rude to ask somebody how much money they earn. Well, actually, I think that's a load of rubbish. I think the more open we are talking about salary and money, then, you know, you can challenge your employers. I think I remember seeing loads of TikToks, and I was on LinkedIn, and this one woman said that she'd gone for like a really senior tech job. She asked for £100,000. It's a good salary, really good.
It's nice.
They offered her 120k, and then she started her job and realised that her male counterparts were on 150k.
Yeah.
So, you know, if people were open about salary and like what you should earn in your industry, like what people around you earn, like what people from demographics earn, you can all be on an equal playing field. But also I think it's on employers to put your salary on job adverts.
Yeah, like 100% couldn't agree more.
Yeah, and I think it's wrong. Like I've applied for jobs in the past, like, and gone for things, and then I've gone through the process and well, actually, you're not offering me what I want.
Yeah.
And you could have saved both our time, effort and energy by just putting it in the beginning or telling me in the beginning. And then there's like that old-fashioned notion where my dad was like, well, you don't ask about salary till towards the end. I was like, no, I'm not wasting my time. And I think that's why I've done so well in my career, because I've been so cutthroat and been like, I'm not doing this job for less than I'm worth.
100%.
And I think other women need to have that confidence. And I think just as a society to be able to talk more about money and salary is definitely beneficial.
100%. You talk there about being a career woman, and I'd be, you know, mad to not ask you a question about Love Island. You know, a lot of what was said on Love Island was all about you being kind of career driven and an independent woman. And to be honest, watching it myself, I saw myself in you, and I thought you were, you know, it was really great the way you came across. But a lot of people had a lot to say on the matter about being a career-driven woman. Looking back on that time in the villa now, do you have kind of any thoughts, any regrets, any things that kind of happened that you think, you know, have really impacted you since coming out?
I think it's catch-22. There always is. I think a lot of people didn't like how I came across or didn't like how I handled certain situations. And that's perfectly okay, like to have their opinion. But actually, when I hear from other women or other people that they saw bits of themselves in me, that's one of the reasons why I wanted to be on the show.
Yeah.
Like, it's massive representation. I rarely see people like me on TV, in social media, anything like that. And I think, how many other women are there like me that don't see themselves at all represented? So that was a massive part for me, and like it makes me feel a lot better. But do you know what? That's normal life for me in dating. That I'm thinking about one particular brunch moment when I had conversation about how many kids people should have, about when I was like, oh no, fuck that. Like, I'm thinking, like, how many dates have I been on where I've had that actual conversation in real life? So many, I've probably lost count. And do you know what? I shouldn't give what I believe up for the sake of having a man in my life. You know, I people have this thing where apparently I hate kids or I don't want them. I never said that. I just said I'm not doing 100% of the work and I'm not giving up my career. And why should I?
No.
If I have to give up cheese, wine and sushi for 9 months, why should I give up the rest of it? Do you know what I mean? Like, I've done the hard graft here.
Yeah.
But it's like, I don't think I would have done anything differently. I don't think I have any
Yeah.
regrets from that conversation. If anything, I wish I stood up for myself more.
Yeah.
And the one thing that, this is why I've not gone back to watch all the episodes, because it can ruin you mentally. Watching that particular episode back and hearing about how the men in the villa spoke about me as a career woman made me so angry. So angry. Like, I remember in the first episode hearing HUGO say, "I'm not the type of woman you can take home to your mum." And I was that really irritated me. I was like, okay, yeah, I've got what TikTok calls a disrespectful mouth because I'm opinionated. So I was like, yeah, okay, if you want a quiet woman, like, fair enough. And then hearing like, oh, well, she said that she only dates X, Y, and Z. I mean, that's not what I said, but, you know, I can't change what was heard. But why should I not want somebody who's on my level, who has the same goals and ambitions as me? Why is that wrong? Why is it okay for a man to be like, well, I want a woman who owns her own salary, but I can't say, well, I want a man who owns his own salary. Like, I don't want anyone to depend on me as much as I don't want to depend on anyone else. That goes the same through my entire relationship. Everything is 50-50. And in fact, like, even people I've dated recently, I would never be like, oh yeah, you can just pay for everything because you're a man. No. So yeah, I like hearing that conversation in particular back made me so angry. And hearing, like, my trolling has come from nobody wanted you in the villa. Well, actually, why is that a piece of trolling? What if I didn't want anyone? Why is that not taken into consideration? And I didn't, because of conversations like that. But because I'm a woman, it's all about whether people want me and whether or not I want them.
It's really interesting, I think, that you kind of share that story. You mentioned HUGO there, and obviously now you guys are really close friends, and I think that's really important to mention. But in the villa, I think it was made out to be bigger than it actually was, the conversation that had happened with him. But he said a comment, something along the lines of, oh, I don't date fake girls, and another comment that he'd apparently said. And it sparked a lot of conversation, you know, on social media, a lot of people saying a lot of different things. Has there been backlash from that conversation? And I know you've experienced a lot of trolling, and I, for one, think it's absolutely ridiculous. But that was kind of a difficult part to watch, but I think something that we really, really needed to see on television, because I think there is a lot of judgment and shaming for people who care about their appearance or who potentially make the decision to have, you know, cosmetic surgery and things like that. What's your view on it now, looking back?
I think actually now I've watched bits back, I can see why there was backlash, because there were so many conversations I had that were cut. For example, when I had conversations with the boys about what it's like to date as a biracial woman in modern dating, what it's like to be bisexual in modern dating, because all of these conversations were cut, none of what I said made sense. And it made me look like I was picking on poor HUGO.
Yeah.
He's a big boy, he can stand up for himself. He knew what I meant wasn't like an attack on him. But I said to him, and this was cut in the conversation, like, I'm saying this to you as a friend because I care about you. I don't want you to come across as someone who's really vain and insensitive, because you've never once asked me. Like, I've had very open conversations with him about his disability. And I was like, how come you never talk to me about your cricket? Like, that's really amazing. That was cut as well. But he's never once asked me. And I was like, you never once asked me about my opinion, why I've had things done. You've just sat here and made comments about other people. And one of the reasons why I got upset, and it's not because, like, with the trolling, because I've had loads of work done, which is also factually inaccurate, but it's not because that I was upset. It's the fact that boys that make those comments also want the girls that look like they've had cosmetic surgery without having cosmetic surgery. And that's why I was so irritated.
Yeah.
I was like, one of the reasons why I felt so self-conscious about my boobs was because a boy wanted me to have certain boobs but didn't want them to be unnatural. And it's like, well, I can't have both. You need to pick one. And like, when HUGO sits there and tells me what his type was, I was like, well, hang on. All of these girls, even now, like, when I see him outside in the real world on social media, the girls, like, he's dated and girls' photos he likes, they've had work done.
Yeah.
Like, I'm sorry. There's like, I love him to bits. Like, he is so close to me, and I like care about him so much, but there's a level of hypocrisy I can take.
Yeah.
You know, there was other conversations that I would have had to have in that time, but with the arm hair. But there is obviously certain restrictions that means I can't have certain conversations. But that's why I got annoyed. It was the judgment and the hypocrisy. And I even said in that conversation, I don't want any he, she, they, them to think that because they've had work done to make themselves feel better, they're now undesirable in your eyes. That's not okay. If that's your type, that's your type. There's a way to phrase it. Fake is not the right word, because I've had lip filler and a boob job, but that doesn't mean I'm fake. That's just the two things I've had enhanced. And because I said I would never not date someone based on their race, because race conversations were cut from the show, that didn't make sense. So people thought I was comparing race to lip filler. I'm a biracial woman. I'm not stupid. Like, I would never say something like that. But I think people take what they see on the show as gospel. And
I think they forget that it's massively edited down. This
100%.
is 24 hours a day that you are being filmed for, and they have to fit it into an hour, plus ads, which probably means it's about 40 minutes long because there's a lot of ads. So how on earth can they get every single conversation into that period of time? And they have to make it entertaining at the same time.
Yeah.
So there's a lot going on, and obviously so much more happens in that, and they have to just take a snapshot. And I think it's really hard when people take a lot of what's going on at kind of face value. I think a lot was said about Faye as well, from, you know, all of the drama. Obviously they need to make it entertaining. If she's kicking off, they're going to give her the time, but then that assumes that she's kicking off all of the time, and, you know, she's like that all the way, and she's not. I know from chatting to you that she's, like, you know, really sweet, really, you know, really down to earth as well. So I think we forget what Love Island, you know, does essentially, and we kind of think like that is everything that has happened in a day, and we take it at face value. Would you agree?
Yeah, definitely. I think people forget there's characters. You are given a character. That's why there's certain things that they want you to do before you've gone in the show. Like, I remember having a haircut before meeting producers face to face, and they were like, "You're not gonna do that, are you?" Because they've already had in their head what you're going to be on that show. Like, don't do that, because that's changing your image. And I was like, oh, okay. Like, I just didn't think anything of it at the time, but like thinking back to it. It's not scripted, conversations are guided, but I remember thinking back to certain things that I was advised or guided to say. And I was thinking, do you know what? Like, there's a reason why they wanted me to say that. And it's because this is the character they wanted to portray me as, which is so inaccurate of my normal life and behaviour. And my family, even my dad, who has zero to say on anything, like, he was like, I was mortified because none of this was you. And, like, you know, he's been in my life all of my life.
He knows you best.
Yeah, like, he knows that I'm that type of... I will fight anything against him just to annoy him. But, like, so he was just like, none of this makes sense to me. And, like, if my parents can sit there and say that, like, it says a lot, I think.
Yeah. We're talking a lot in this episode about essentially being judged for being spiked, being judged as a woman, being judged for going on Love Island. Has there been any kind of impacts to you being judged, and obviously people taking what they saw on Love Island at kind of face value? Like, how has that kind of, like, you know, affected your life since leaving the villa?
Really weirdly. So obviously, because my previous career background is in politics and I'm very politically outspoken, I wrote a tweet once, and I just remember it was against something the Prime Minister had said. I don't like who agrees with everything anyone says anyway, but and I remember getting a tweet saying, "Shut up, you got famous for wearing a bikini on TV." But no one talks about how the fact he's famous because his family has money, and that he has multiple children with multiple different women because he has multiple affairs. Like, but for example, like, Theresa May was judged for not having children. Like, why is it always on women for that judgment? Like, Dr. Alex went on Love Island. He wore a swimsuit on TV, but now we talk about him being an amazing doctor. Yeah. Whereas, you know, I mean, hopefully in time, people talk about me being a spokesperson, a lawyer, as opposed to being a girl in a bikini. But, like, why is that? Like, why did he not have that? Like, when he went back to medicine, like, oh, you shut up, you got famous for wearing a pair of shorts on TV, because he did. It's so different that because I was wearing a bikini that I've got more stigma.
I see it, you know, I think, you know, the moves that you're making right now, and it's so clear because it's the first thing you've done since coming out of the villa. You know, you have clearly said, these are the campaigns that I feel really passionate about, and these are the things that I'm going to now work on. Yes, I'm going to, you know, I've got 300,000 followers on Instagram, and they're going to be coming along for the journey and all of that. But I'm going to be posting, you know, pictures of me, you know, modelling, but I'm also going to be talking about the gender pay gap and spiking and politics and the things that are really important to me. And I think that's really great because not everyone who comes off Love Island has that goal or that ambition. So I think it's really, really great to see that. In terms of, like, you know, dating before and after Love Island. Has anything changed at all?
It's weird. So dating, if I said that, I'd be lying if I said Love Island didn't bring opportunities in terms of dating. More people know who you are. More people have seen bits about you. So yeah, I've had some people in the DMs and all these things, and I have been on dates with a couple of people. But do you know what? I think, if anything, it's made it a little bit harder because, like, even if someone hasn't watched the show and has no idea what's happened, they have this notion in their head that I am something that I'm not. And do you know what? It was more obvious to me recently. So I was seeing someone recently, I wrote about it in my blog, and, you know, they'd ended things really abruptly. And it hit me quite hard. And I remember, like, I still think about it now, the things that they said to me. And I was thinking, like, that's a really shallow thing to say because I would never behave like that. And I remember someone making a comment to me being like, yeah, okay, it's hard. Like, you don't want to go to the cinema with the person you're dating and be stared at the whole time. But that person knew that would come with the territory. I've made it very clear, like, from day dot, that's going to happen. And I said that I'll do my hardest to protect you from things like that on social media. And I had done. I didn't, you know, very few people know about it. So clearly I did it quite well, but turning around to me and being like, well, you know, we're just too different because you own a pair of Balenciaga trainers. And I was like, hang on, did I ask you to pay for them? Did you contribute in any way, shape or form? And I was like, well, why are you judging me on what I wear? I wouldn't judge you if you wore Primark. So why are you judging me just because I've spent a bit more money on something? And judging me because apparently I live this lifestyle that I don't. That's what it looks like sometimes in social media, because that's what social media is. You show a highlight reel of your life, but people that know me as the gal that walks around in hoodies and tracksuit bottoms 95% of the time with no makeup on. But it's like, I think I do get judged for being like, for liking certain things or having certain things, but it's just like, I'm still the same person. I still go and eat McDonald's in my car with my friends at 3 a.m. in the morning in a car park. It's like, so yeah, I think that's a judgment you get as a woman, as opposed to a judgment you get as a man. Because I've never ever said something like that to a man. No. When I'm ending something, it's usually there's a reason. So for me, I was like, okay, that's a really shallow thing to say. But do you know what? It's like, again, with all previous conversations in the villa, like, I'm not gonna let that stop me. I'm not gonna change myself to fit into a man's small box. So yeah.
Definitely. We're going to chat to you a little bit more about your 20s in general. We always ask this question to every single guest that comes on the podcast, and we always ask them if they've ever had an absolute adulting disaster, fail, a big error that they've made that they think, I can't even call myself an adult, that's so embarrassing or cringy or anything like that.
Oh my good grief. I've done so many weird things. Oh no. Now I'm really going to out myself. Oh, what have I done? Do you know what? I have an accumulation of loads of really small things. And then I sit there and I'm like, how have I managed to live? Because I've not lived with my parents since I was 18. So like, I do weird things. Like, I sit in the car park for like 30 minutes and outside Tesco's because I don't know what I've gone for. And then I'll leave with everything but that. Or like, I think at one time I've like accidentally set like my blinds on fire with my straighteners. Or like... put metal in the microwave, like
easily done.
Blown my microwave up, and I'm thinking, how am I still alive? Like, how have I managed to make it to 26 without any physical injuries? Like, yeah, I don't have anything massive, I don't think, but I've done loads and loads of stupid things.
We're all human, right? And we're all learning. Talking about that, our podcast is all about kind of all the things that, you know, we're learning in our 20s, and nobody is perfect, right? So everyone is still working through something. Is there something in particular that you're trying to work on at the minute, getting a bit better about, something in yourself? Maybe you've realised, you know, something that you'd like to improve on, or something that you're kind of working through, getting better at the moment?
Yeah, I think I'm not very forthcoming with my emotions. I am one of those people that keeps my cards very close to my chest. And I think sometimes that's good, but sometimes that's really hindrance, especially when you're trying to build long-lasting relationships, regardless of like whether you're friendships or family or actual intimate, loving relationships. But, you know, I'm not ashamed to say I'm having CBT, I'm having therapy off the back of Love Island, but I'm not having them because of the show. Yeah. And I said this to the therapist. I said that, you know, I am aware I'm very closed and I can be very direct and cut off. And I think I overthink things a lot. And that's something that I'm learning to deal with. And I think for me that's the biggest learning curve in terms of anything. Like I need people around me that are going to be patient because I take a long time to warm up to be able to do these kinds of things. And I'm aware that I think I know best with everything. I know best and I can do everything by myself, even if I can't.
Yeah.
I'm that type of person. So yeah, for me, that is my biggest learning curve in my 20s.
I think that's fair to say. I think a lot of people will agree with that and will see themselves in that as well. Because I think we like to think that we've all got it all figured out and like, yeah, don't tell me I'm wrong, you know. I could totally agree with that. We always end the podcast with one question, and it's to look back at your 20-year-old self. So right at the beginning of your 20s, if you could look back at 20-year-old Sharon in the eye and you could just give her one piece of advice, what would you say to her?
Oh my God. Maybe don't overpluck your eyebrows. No. If I could go back and see 20-year-old Sharon again, I would my piece of advice to her is just to do what makes you happy at that present moment in time, because everything's going to work out okay. I think it's so cliche when people say something like that, but genuinely for me, like I didn't trust myself when I was younger. I thought at the time I was always second guessing what I was doing, but actually like for me, that was the right thing at the time. And if it made me happy at the time, that's enough. So that is what I would tell 20-year-old Sharon.
Great advice. Thank you so much for coming into the studio today. I've absolutely loved chatting to you. I think you are making really important moves and I love everything that you're doing and we're fully behind everything that you're doing at the minute. So thank you so much for coming in and telling us all about what you're up to.
Thank you so much for having me. I've really enjoyed it.
Thank you so much. If you've enjoyed this episode, please make sure that you head over and click subscribe or follow so you never miss a future episode of us in the studio. Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of the Talk 20s podcast. I hope it inspired you in some way and pops a little pep in your step for this week. Got a spare minute? It would mean the absolute world if you could subscribe, leave a review, or share this episode with a friend. We're on a mission to help as many 20-somethings navigate their 20s as we can, and we really cannot do it without your support. We also love to hear from you. You can find us on all platforms via the handle @Talk20s. And if you're struggling with something in your 20s that we haven't already covered in the podcast, DM us and let us know so we can cover it in a future episode. And for more stories of inspiration and resources to help you make the best of your 20s, head to our website, talk20s.com.